Where is the fourth question? First, let's focus on the question itself. So everyone is quite used to this. The process of solving the problem isn't actually that difficult. It's just a matter of following the steps, as long as you do what needs to be done in the right order. The question asks, compared to traditional marketing strategies, compared to most traditional marketing strategies, there is a special kind of marketing strategy on that spans across multiple social media platforms like Facebook, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, Xiaohongshu, and so on, right? A marketing strategy that crosses over several social media platforms. What are its distinctive features? The specialty refers to what makes it special, different, or unique. The special thing about this new type of multimedia, multi-platform marketing strategy is that it requires something this fills in the first blank. Next, it also mentions that a company can take this kind of characteristic and turn it into an advantage. Through what kind of method can it be transformed into an advantage? We've discovered something. In this sentence, it's a fill in the blank question, but this blank is not independent like the previous one. Take a look earlier, we did a fill in the blank question, and that one was independent, right? It was two sentences. Each situation was separate. One was not as important without comparison, and the other was important without comparison. There are two independent sentences, but that's not the case here. Look at the fill in the blank we're working on now. It's a complete sentence, you see. It requires combining two parts together. It says, the marketing strategies of multimedia and social media platforms. The key feature is that it needs something, right? And then a company can turn this feature into something else. You'll notice that in the second part of the sentence, this feature still refers back to the previous part in cases like this. For fill-in-the-blank questions like this, where two blanks combine into a single sentence, both parts depend on each other to complete the meaning. I strongly recommend that you tackle them together. There's no point in doing them separately because they're not independent scenarios. So now we know that, in short, we need to talk about what makes multi-platform strategies unique and how we can leverage those advantages. How can we make the most of these advantages? Next, let's take a look. The options here are quite simple, so let's quickly go through them. Some are about more frequent updates, some are about investing more time, and some are about, well, providing more information. As we quickly review them, in summary, they're basically about things like time, cost, or the target of customer engagement, and so on. After reviewing these two things, I know that the upcoming story is probably about media image, and the roles I might take on could be that of a customer, or perhaps the person executing media marketing, like a social media manager. All right, let's first look at the text. The text says, what is a characteristic of doing marketing on various social media platforms? The characteristic is that they need to attract people's attention. So what does that mean? Oh, this kind of marketing strategy is characterized by the need to update small pieces of information several times a day. Pay attention, it needs to be updated every day. And each update is very small, just like when you look at those, what are they, TVBS fan pages or Sandy fan pages, Mishi fan pages, CTTV fan pages, those news media fan pages. They just type a few words, update immediately, add a link, and then update 10, 20, 30 times a day, sometimes 50 or 60 messages in an hour, bombarding you with a large number of small pieces of information. But the fragmentation of target audiences across different social media websites, this means that the time commitment and necessary marketing budget are often quite comparable, but the audiences on each social or community platform are different, which leads to actually, in terms of time, often quite comparable. What does comparable mean? Comparable to what? Because earlier it was compared to traditional media, right? So it should mean that compared to traditional media, the time spent using this method is actually about the same. For example, traditional media might less content, lower frequency, but more information. However, with new media like we just mentioned, using multiple community or social media platforms, even though information is less, because each platform has a different audience, you have to figure out how to target each. So in the end, time spent might end up being about the same. Next, in addition, different social media platforms have their own unique interfaces, and they also have various restrictions. For example, this platform doesn't allow NSFW content, or that platform will reduce your reach if you post images. Some platforms even require special tools just to make a post, right? For example, how do Facebook groups work? What about Xiaohongshu? How about Instagram? Each platform has its own set of rules, right? So as long as you can understand these differences and also grasp the unique audiences on each platform, if you can fully comprehend all of this, then you'll truly have a unique and significant advantage, along with special opportunities to effectively shape your important message. and you'll be able to attract each unique group. So after reading this article, let's take another look at this question. At this point, you need to read the question very carefully. The question says, compared to traditional marketing models, what are the characteristics of the new marketing model? Pay attention here. It's asking about the differences. It's not just asking about the features of the new marketing model itself, but specifically about what makes it different from the old one. Okay. If it's not something that's different from the old model, then you shouldn't choose it. And then one more thing about the differences. Besides identifying these differences, what kind of advantages can we create through that, right? And what methods can we use to create these advantages? So from what perspective should we approach this? The perspective is that we are media editors. Ourselves are the kind of fragmented multi-platform media editors who have to publish content across various platforms. So what next? Go back and think again about where in this article the differences are mentioned. As a media editor, here it says, hey, we're adopting this new strategy. What's the unique feature of this? Is that we provide a large amount of fragmented, up-to-date information. This could be one of our characteristics, a point of difference, right? This is something unique about us. And then next, it seems like it requires very little time. We see that compared to traditional methods, but with fragmented information, every platform has different content. So in the end, the amount of time spent is about the same. So the time difference isn't significant. The time spent is about the same. So that's not our point of difference. The real difference is the fragmentation of information, right? Okay, so the difference lies in the fragmented nature of the information and the frequency of updates, but time is not our differentiator. Besides that, different platforms also have different limitations, different interfaces as well. So both the interface and the limitations are points of difference. The interface and limitations are also differentiators, but through what? By understanding these different limitations and these different audiences, we can then find unique opportunities, and that becomes our advantage. So how do we gain our own advantage? It's by understanding the different types of information and audiences, right? So now, after reviewing all this, let's answer this question again. What exactly is the point of difference? Let's start using the process of eliminationist more frequent updates, our point of difference. That's something we've just noticed. Compared to traditional media, we update information in small amounts multiple times a day. Is that definitely it? In practice, do we actually use it more? Is that the point of difference? No, as we just saw in the article, in practice, the usage is about the same as traditional media because our fragmented content is distributed with different characteristics for each piece. So in the end, the total usage time is about the same. Is the amount of information actually greater? The article only emphasized that we break information into fragments, but it didn't mention if the total amount of information is more or less, right? With fragmentation, each piece of information contains less content. So this isn't our distinguishing feature. Our distinguishing feature is that each individual piece of information contains less content, but whether the total amount has increased or decreased, no one has told us. Moving on, traditional media differences. Is it more precise? Is there more accurate customer targeting? It doesn't seem like the article specifically mentioned whether traditional methods have precise customer targeting. It only talked about the small differences between traditional and new information, which are just the frequency and fragmentation of the information. But it seems the article didn't specifically mention the amount of information in traditional media or whether traditional methods target customers. So this isn't something we would choose either. Next, did it mention money? It seems like it didn't mention money at all, right? There was no mention of cost. So for the first box, we should probably choose more frequent updates. But actually, at the same time, you could also directly choose the second box. Why? Because when you were reading the article, you also noticed that, lastly, I mentioned one benefit. If we can understand the differences between each platform and understand our customers, then we can achieve precise targeting, right? So at the same time, you could also choose the second box, which is that we can gain an advantage through precise targeting. So the answer to this question would be the first box and the fourth box. Actually, when doing this kind of question, especially if it's a fill in the blank type where they're grouped together, I would suggest you do both at the same time. You can just put yourself in the role of a content editor. Think about it. If I were a content editor, what tasks would I be doing in new media? What exactly is our unique feature that sets us apart from traditional media? And then, what exactly are our advantages and opportunities? If you go back and review the information in the article, you'll be able to quickly organize it. Our distinguishing feature is fragmentation, frequency, and immediacy. Our time cost seems to be about the same, so there's not much of an advantage there. However, if we can seize this opportunity, We can quickly target individual clients. When you develop your own way of thinking, you can turn this sentence, combine it with the method of substitution, and then go back to review the article with your own perspective. For this sentence, you actually don't even need to look at the options. You can figure it out yourself. This is the ultimate goal we strive for when doing CRT or TPA questions. Now, let's look at the last question for today. The first part is a question asking, in the two columns of the table below, what should be selected for each R respectively? If, within the article, the agency's official announcement or public notice was originally and primarily intended to prevent individuals from actively engaging in PO, strongly discourage P, then this would be a significant consideration. But inadvertently, what does inadvertently mean? It means unexpectedly, unintentionally. This word inadvertently means unintentionally encouraged R. So when these two situations are combined together, you can use this to describe the principles mentioned in the article, and then you need to choose one for each. This question is a bit more advanced, right? It's a bit more sophisticated. The first part is asking us to fill in the blanks. It's very clear that it wants us to fill in the blanks. It's a complete sentence, right? It's not two separate situations. They need to be combined into one sentence. Also, the words used in this sentence are a bit more sophisticated, a bit more abstract. So we need to rethink this. When we look at the announcement later, its original intention was to prevent this thing from happening. But unintentionally, it actually unintentionally encouraged this thing. So these two can be linked together to describe the situation in the article. All right. So at the very least, we can be sure that P is something they don't want, something this organization doesn't want. And as for R, it's also something they originally didn't want to encourage. Do you see? The key is that it happened unintentionally. What does that mean? It means they actually didn't intend for R to happen, but unintentionally ended up encouraging R, but accidentally ended up causing sudden death. So both P and R are things that this agency doesn't want. You notice that in every question, I always emphasize reading the question carefully, very carefully, and then even more carefully, because if you misread the question, no matter how well you understand the passage, it's meaningless. If your direction is wrong, I have to tell you how to approach the questions in the right direction. He wants to discourage P, meaning P is not something he teaches or encourages. He doesn't like P, but accidentally ended up encouraging it. So R is also something he doesn't like. He didn't originally intend to encourage it. He just accidentally encouraged R. So these two things are things he doesn't like to do. All right, let's take a look at what the article says. It says, according to a specific version of the law, what kind of law? The law of unintended consequences policies. Unintended means unintended results, right? The law of unintended consequences refers to those policies, certain policies, implemented to achieve certain ends, policies that are used to achieve certain goals. However, after being implemented, do they end up making it more difficult to achieve those goals? Instead, they have the opposite effect and often make these goals even harder to achieve. So actually, the reason I say this question for last is because it really tests your reading ability. In the GMAT, the most difficult passages to read are those filled with abstract language and abstract vocabulary. We need to break down the sentence. The subject is policies. What kind of policies? Policies that have been implemented. Policies that have been implemented to achieve specific goals. If you have a policy and you want to achieve a specific goal, what is the result that this policy often brings? These goals become harder to achieve. In Chinese, it's just a few words. What does counterproductive mean? It means having the opposite effect, that kind of concept. Suppose that a government agency, let's say a government agency has already announced its intentions. Its intention is to implement a certain existing policy. What does it mean to implement the policy? The word publication here refers to communication. Does everyone understand this word? Utilizing means to make use of something, in this case, using the official channels of the government agency, or using official equipment for communication. What will happen? It will be regulated, it will be monitored. What does that mean? Let me give you an example. If you make phone calls using the company's phone, the company can listen in. If you use the company's computer or company email to send emails, the company's IT or security department can check them. They can look at your emails. If you chat using the company's computer, basically any message you receive or send using any company device or any company communication channel will go through the company's scrutiny. That's what it means. Communication refers to information exchange, right? If you use the company's channels or any company equipment, just like the examples we mentioned earlier, they will all be monitored by the company. With Emperor is to be investigated. The company will investigate these employees, and the employees will be subject to investigation. And then potentially there's a chance they could be fired or laid off. In what situations would they be dismissed? That would be if these employees are found to have neglected their duties or violated regulations. Oh, if they violate company rules or neglect their duties, the company will fire them. Now, let's think about ITIL. In this article, the example emphasizes that if, say, today, Hayes says there's a company that clearly stated it would strictly enforce a policy starting today, any company communication devices or channels, mail, phone, mobile phone, and so on, as long as you use the company's communication devices or channel, all your messages will be monitored by us. If we find that you have violated the rules or are derelict in your duties, you may be fired or punished. Now let's think about ITIL. What role are we supposed to take on? Actually, there are two roles you can assume. First, what does the company not want to happen? Right? The company is doing this to prevent certain things from happening. The role we need to assume is that of someone inside a company who doesn't want certain things to happen. The purpose of this policy is to achieve that, isn't it? The second thing to consider is what might be unintentionally encouraged. This is something the company can't control. It's beyond the company's control. So we should slow down and think about what the restricted employees might do. So these two boxes represent different perspectives. The first is the company's intention. So this is certain there's no problem at our company. When the company takes this action, what is its real reason for doing so? What does it want to achieve? This is something the company can't control. It's something they didn't anticipate. So here, it's better to put yourself in the shoes of an ordinary employee. Let's think about it. What is the company's real purpose in implementing this policy? The purpose is probably to prevent employees from using company resources for personal matters or leaking confidential information using company property, basically. These two reasons. Why does the company want to stop you from using company phone, email, or other company resources? The reason they tell you I will monitor and supervise is because of this. I think company resources should be used for company business. So they're afraid you'll leak confidential information like at TSMC, chip design secrets you can't let leak through company channels, or you use company resources for personal matters. This is the company's logic. As a company, why prohibit employees from doing certain things? If it's just to prevent wasting electricity, that's pointless. It's because employees use company resources for personal use or leak confidential information. That's why they implement these restrictions. If employees use company resources for personal matters or leak confidential information, what could happen? Let's look at it from the employee's perspective. If you're restricted by the company in this way, how would you react? The more employees there are, the more likely some will want to quit, right? It's like if every company is run like a closed off industrial park, just like the KK Park, people might not want to stay. I might as well just quit, which will lead to a drop in your company's productivity. Or fine, in that case, I just won't use the company's stuff at all. I'll just use my own personal devices, right? When I go to work, I won't use the company's phone since it's all monitored anyway. I'll just use my private phone. So from an employee's perspective, that's what I'd be thinking. Either I just quit, right? Or I start slacking off at work, or what else? Well, if you insist on monitoring me, then I'll just find a way that you can't monitor, something like that, and use those methods to get around it. All right, let's look at the options. First, let's start with option P. Okay, P refers to things the company does not want to happen. As we just discussed, there are two things they don't want, right? Either it's that, or it's that I don't want the company to leak information, or I don't want employees to use the internet freely. Now, let's look at the first statement. Option A, the first option, says evidence of employee misconduct is sometimes reliable enough to result in disciplinary action. So, does the company want to discipline employees? It doesn't seem like it, right? It seems like this is just a matter of following procedure. If an employee breaks the rules, they should be disciplined. So pay attention to P here. For P, we need to choose things the company does not want to happen, things the company doesn't like. Now, what does option A say? It says that if an employee is caught engaging in improper behavior, they should be disciplined. But isn't this exactly what the company is supposed to do? It's just handling things according to the rules. So the first option is definitely not what we're supposed to choose. Let me move on to the next part. So the first option isn't what we want because this is just standard procedure. This is what should be done, right? If I were a company manager and an employee got caught, they should be fired. Why would I discourage this? So what does option B say? It says that when employees are conducting company business, they often use their personal phones. This is something I don't want to happen, right? I'm worried about information leaks, aren't I? I'm afraid of leaks, so I don't want you to use your personal phone. So I'll keep this option in mind. The third one says that investigations into employees' improper conduct will remain open until concrete evidence is obtained. This is also something my company would want to do, right? I want to keep investigating whether any employees are breaking the law, don't I? So this follows the same logic as option A. They're both incorrect because these actions are meant to protect our company's interests and they're things we should be doing. The multiple choice option says that employees spend a lot of time at work on social networking sites like Facebook or doing things unrelated to their work. This is also something my company doesn't want to happen, so I would keep this as well. Option E says that employees reduce the time they spend on trivial matters, meaning things unrelated to work. This is actually what I hope to achieve. I hope employees won't slack off or waste time. So this option is not something I don't want to happen either. Now, with these two options, how should we choose between them? It's very simple. Let's think about it. The purpose of this company's announcement is to stop employees from doing this thing. The policy they use is meant to prevent employees from doing it. So what is their policy? Their policy is that whenever you use company equipment, you will be monitored. If you use the company's computers or phones, you will be monitored. Why do I do this? Is it to make you use your personal phone? Probably not, right? Is it to stop you from using your personal phone? No, that's not it. If I say that using company equipment makes it easier to be monitored, if I say that everything you do on company equipment will be monitored, how could that possibly stop or discover this behavior? Wouldn't that actually encourage you not to use company devices? So the answer can't be the second. So the only possible answer is the fourth one, which is what? It's that I forbid you from using company equipment. I say that using company equipment will be monitored because I want to stop you from slacking off or goofing around. So for the first box, the answer is the fourth one. But now you can also start to sense it. At this point, if we bring the discussion back to the fourth option and put ourselves in the employee's shoes, you forbid me from using company equipment and say that using company equipment will be monitored. Well, that's fine then. I just won't use it. I'll just use my personal devices instead. So at this point, the second box can also be logically selected. The answer is the first one. Let's do a neutral summary of the whole thing. TPA is actually just a slightly more complex game, but the essence of this game is a bit different from traditional CR and RC. The key to the TPA game is how to filter information. How do you make a normal logical decision? This normal logical decision refers to the choices you would make if you put yourself in the role in real life. So don't keep seeing yourself as just a bystander. No matter what, don't think from the perspective of a third party. If you look at the 5 questions we just went through, which principles did we use to solve them? Now let's go back and review the principles we mentioned at the beginning. The principles we just talked about are the ones we follow. First, read the question. Then determine whether it's a weakening question, strengthening question, or fill in the blank related to NCR or RC, right? After that, we read the passage. Once we finish reading the passage, we actively go back and reread the question. We need to determine the direction the question is asking about, whether it's asking for details, attitude, or how to incorporate our own perspective to reinterpret it. Then observe whether we should solve the questions together or separately. In fact, most of the questions are done separately. Only a small number are done together. In the end, we always use the substitution method to filter the answers, right? So today you can see the complete process. This is our problem-solving workflow.